So, Sidereal Whale has caused a bit of a stir. I posted a video probably about a week ago at this point on just my thoughts on Endwalker, and I talked about Sidereal Whale a bit. And I think of all the points I made in that whole video, Sidereal Whale and just commentary around it became like the most talked about thing. And a lot of people were like, I think it's a terrible fish. I think it's a great fish. And a whole bunch of stuff back and forth. I personally have some weird thoughts on it. So some people were like, hey, what do you think? And so I thought, why not do this again? Because everyone seemed to like it when I talk about fish forever. So here we go. So Sidereal Whale, for those of you who don't know, is a legendary fish added in patch 6.55 in Endwalker, and it was the legendary fish for the final zone, Ultima Thule. By the way, there will be spoilers. And what you need to get to catch Sidereal Whale is a 3 EBEs. Specifically, it's EBE. Let me bring it up. EBE 9318, which is the non-big version. 2 Unbegotten, which are only caught off of Horizon Event Mooch, and we'll be talking about Horizon Events a lot. And 1 Philena, which is like the big bottleneck. And it is only available from midnight to 8 a.m. Eorzean time during astromagnetic storms after umbral winds, which a bit of numbers already. That's a 2.3% chance of occurring in Ultima Thule. So we're going to talk about downtime a little bit too as well. A few folks in the Fishcord have brought up some interesting points that I'm going to highlight here as well. And I have some actual weather forecasts up for Sidereal Whale and some other different fish. And we're going to talk about those a little bit. So Sidereal Whale, in the actual process of catching Sidereal Whale, what you basically have to do is you get Fisherman's Intuition, which is a buff that allows you to catch certain fish in a fishing hole. And you get this buff by catching the 3 EBEs, 2 Unbegotten, and 1 Philenia. When you do that, you get the buff, and it's exactly 10 minutes long. And you have to mooch Horizon Events to catch Sidereal Whale. When you do that, and when I say when you do that, I mean what time you actually start mooching or trigger your int, can determine a few different things. If you do it between midnight and 4 a.m., there's a chance that the ferocious bite you get is going to be a Philenia. If you do it from 4 to 8 p.m., or 4 to 8 a.m., excuse me, it's midnight to 8 a.m. If you do it during that time, the only ferocious bite that you get is going to be a Sidereal Whale. Now, the community that is the Fishcord, the fishing community, has been getting data on mooches, basically, which is how many bites either Philenia or Sidereal Whale have while you are mooching Horizon Events. So each time you mooch a Horizon event, it could be during very specifically during midnight to 8 a.m. It can be a Traina, it can be an Unbegotten, it can be a Philenia, and if you have Intuition, it could be Sidereal Whale. So it's a one of 4 different things, and the distribution on that is not equal. For the most part, though, I'm going to be focusing on just the probabilities and the chances of catching Sidereal Whale and Philenia, which at the moment, between midnight and 8 a.m., Sidereal Whale is currently sitting around 5.37 to 5.85% chance, and these numbers will change over time to bite on the mooch. And that depends on when you actually do it. Either it's going to be in that first half, 0 to 4, or the second half, which will be 4 to 8 a.m. And then Philenia is currently sitting at around a 5.22% chance. So you're looking at basically if we assume that the average, and this is kind of like the accepted average of anywhere between 5 to 7 mooches in that 4-hour Eorzean time period, you're getting at least 5 to 7 Horizon event to mooch. If you're getting anything less, you may need to look at how you're fishing, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. And if you're getting more than that, great, nothing to complain about. So if you're assuming you're getting 5, we'll say 5. That's worst case scenario. 5, and we'll round these all around. So we'll just assume everything's a 5% chance for either whale or Philania. You're looking at it's a 5% chance to get a Philania off a Horizon event mooch, and I'm trying to do math on the fly here. I should have prepared this. That's 1 in 20. So you would need about 20 Horizon events to get a Philania. I know some people are going to be like, well, I've had more, I've had less. Bear with me on this for a second. So Philania, we assume, every 1 in 20 on average, every 20 Horizon event mooches will be a Philania. And if you're getting at least 5 per window from midnight to 4 a.m., that's going to take you, on average, 4 windows until you actually get a Philania. Because you basically have to get up to, you can assume that roughly 1 in 20. So if it's going to take you, 5 per window, 5 into 20 is 4, so it's going to be 4 windows worth of time before you actually get a single Philania. And once you get the Philania, getting intuition is basically you just keep mooching. The way I recommend doing, actually, I'll get back to that in a second. So you're looking at a 1 in 4 windows, 1 to 4 windows that you're going to be able to get Philania. Can it take more? Yes. Have I heard it take more? Yes. I think one of my first Philania catches on one of my alts, I think took me like 6 or 7 windows. When I was preparing my first, maybe second intuition to record for the guide, it took me, I think, at least 8. So I went twice higher than was expected to get a Philania, just to be able to actually do the intuition for whale. So if we assume then, ideally, on average, it's going to take you 4 windows to get a Philania, which means every 4 windows you're going to get an intuition, and then it's going to be another 4 intuitions until you get my math here is going to be a little rough. Just bear with me on this one. Assuming that you trigger the intuition at the start of the window, and you're doing a full 10-minute window worth of mooching, we're assuming, again, 5 Horizon events. Again, that's going to be another 5% chance to get whale during that intuition, and you're going to be looking at another at least 4 intuitions to get that. So, on average, I'm usually finding it to be roughly, people are getting Sidereal Whale in 4 or less intuitions. Anything more than that is definitely an outlier. And if you are going for more than 4 intuitions, and you're still getting that average of 5 Horizon events per mooch, 5 or more per window, not mooch, sorry. That's unfortunate and very unlucky, and I apologize for that. That's very much, though, an outlier. So I'll be talking about the outliers a bit down the road. So basically, Sidereal Whale, you're looking at maybe 1 to 4, we'll say maybe 5 intuitions until you finally get a successful bite into a catch. And I'm assuming that you get the catch because the actual bite rate, the successful bite rate for it is close to like 80-85%, so it's more likely that you're going to get it. If it slips, that's going to be a different thing, but I'm assuming ideal cases here. Minimal but ideal cases. So you're looking at most 16 Falenia windows to get all the intuitions you need to get one Sidereal Whale. Looking at other legendary fish like sea butterfly, charbonnet, cinder surprise, bit of an outlier, but still there. Aelid scan, 16 windows isn't actually that outrageous. To be able to get intuition 4 times, to be able to get to be on, we'll call it drop rate for Falenia. For Sidereal Whale. So on paper and kind of mathematically, Sidereal Whale, not really all that bad. I know I just threw a bunch of math at y'all, and I think that was probably like the past 5 minutes. I apologize. That was a bit rough for me to even explain, but I needed to establish, or I wanted to establish that, on paper, Sidereal Whale looks like a pretty normal legendary fish. However, and don't leave yet, because we all know it's not. And we all know, and at least we've been hearing, that this is kind of like the new fish that no one likes. This is like the new cinder surprise, the new lancet fish, the new ruby dragon, the new sea butterfly. And it's a lot of similar arguments that come up around it too. I feel like Sidereal Whale and lancet fish are kind of bundled together because they're both jail fish, and they both jail differently. The general consensus is lancet fish's intuition is a little bit worse than Sidereal Whale's intuition, because you'll get half of lancet fish, and there's a very good chance you will not get the second Mora Tecta, forcing you to continue to jail or to leave and restart. Whereas with Sidereal Whale, once you get Falenia, you're guaranteed the intuition when the window opens. So Sidereal Whale on paper looks fine, and yet there's a lot of issues that people bring up. And I'm going to go through a handful of them that I see consistently, because I see it on the guide, I see it in the fish court, I see it on Twitter, I see it all over the forums. And so I'm going to kind of break down each one of these and just, I'm going to do my best to provide like some factual information around it while minimizing some of my opinion, but I'm going to include some of my opinion anyway. So just be warned on that. So the first one is Downtime. We have had, since it was released, Sidereal Whale has actually had a really long and consistent string of multiple day, sometimes even multiple week downtime, which is on par for a legendary fish, but for a zone that only has three weather options, which is Ultima Thule, you can only be fair skies, it can be umbral winds or astromagnetic storms. It's a little bit strange. And Fishcord member Cafcolio pointed out that a lot of the windows for Sidereal Whale since it was launched have been abnormally long. It has been a couple of weeks. I know just this past week, I think it came off like a 5-day vacation. There was a couple of and there's been at least 2 or 3 week plus long vacations since I remember catching it back in February. So there's, to put it simply, it seems like we kind of got front loaded on the long downtime, because if you look at the weather forecast, and there's stuff online where you can actually predict the weather in Final Fantasy XIV for basically any zone, including Baja and Eureka. You can just predict it outwards for however long. This is how we know that Cinder Surprise's downtime of like 45 days is going to occur in the year 2152. Like, we've been able to predict that far out. So I went ahead and looked at what the whale windows are going to look like starting from today, which is June 9th, and looked at the next 100 windows. And the next 100 windows, the 100th window from today, I should point out, is Friday, January 3rd, 2025. So, 6 months from now? Which is pretty good. And if you look at the upcoming windows from here, there's one almost every day. Some of them are, I think the longest one that I have seen so far is about a 4 or 5 day downtime towards the end of June, which is not a huge deal because that's when Dawn Trail is going to be launching. So I think a lot of people will be focusing on that anyways. But looking through this, it's not until we hit, I saw it earlier. Where was it? I should say almost August. We see a window almost every 1 to 2 days. Some days have 3 windows. Like I'm just randomly here looking at like July 7th. There's 3 windows on July 7th. So I think a lot of the downtime that Sidereal Whale was getting was just really bad luck on our part. Not mentioning when the window actually opened. I'm looking at just the downtime right now. I think we just got really unlucky. And I think that unluckiness played into the annoyance and the frustrations and sort of amplified it with Sidereal Whale. And so moving forward, it has a pretty normal legendary downtime window from what I can see. Like September 9th, 2024, three windows again. There is a 2-week window at the end of September, but then it goes right back into having 4 windows in 5 days, or another 3 like a week later. So I think one of the things with fishing is a lot of the personalities of fish get determined by that initial impression, and Sidereal Whale just had a really bad first impression with us. I think that was, I think we got a little unlucky with that, and just how much downtime there has been recently since it was launched. So looking forward, the actual uptime for it is going to probably increase. It's still going to be a few days, but it should actually increase a little bit more as the months go on. So I'm also going to to compare, as I was saying, the 100th window from today, which again is June 9th, 2024, is on the 100th window is January 3rd, 2025. It's at midnight GMT -5. I brought up Cinder Surprise. And Cinder Surprise, same thing, next 100 windows from today, which is again June 9th. Its 100th window is Friday, September 19th of 2025, 18 months from now. And so I think Sidereal Whale, its downtime is going to get better. And I think we're going to see that it's going to be up more often. And I think some of those complaints will be able to start going away, because it is definitely not as bad as it could have been, even though for that, for the past couple of months, it has basically had the same amount of uptime. It feels like, at least, as Cinder has in the same amount of time. So with its uptime becoming a little bit more prevalent, I think the next piece of feedback that a lot of people had about just Sidereal Whale's downtime specifically is the timing of when it came up. For those who don't know, weather is agnostic. It is of your region. So everybody at the exact same time, no matter what time it is locally, is going to have the same weather. It's very persistent throughout the world. And so this means it's entirely possible to get umbral to astromagnetic storm, umbral wind to astromagnetic storm from midnight to 8 a.m. And for me, in the US, it might be at 5 p.m. But for somebody in Europe, it's going to be like midnight, 1 a.m., which is not really ideal. But then again, also for, say, a Southeast Asian player, it's going to be like 5 or 6 in the morning. So the system for weather, independently of it works independent of region, and kind of creates the quote-unquote fairest system that it can for a view of the game that is global. And so something that I'll say is, a bad time for you is a great time for somebody else. And I think the more often that we get windows, the more often we're going to see more people actually being able to fish and go for it. And the less we'll see issues of people saying, well, it's always up when I'm at work. So I think, kind of just to sum up the downtime conversation, I think as we're moving forward, we're going to see Sidereal Whale, come up way more often. And with that, I think some of the downtime critiques are going to drop, because people will have more opportunities to actually try and catch the fish. So I was talking about the Philania earlier, and how, roughly at the moment, it's going to be an average of 4 windows you should be able to see it at. And I can hear right now people going, no, that's not the case. Because I've definitely seen and experienced myself going way more than 4 windows for a Philania. And I think, one, it is an average, and statistically speaking, you can do it in 1. I've done that. You can do it in 10. That's also happened to me. But I think one of the things that this brings up, and I talked about this a little bit in my last ramble video, sometimes it's not, sometimes it is numbers, sometimes you're just unlucky, but a lot of the time I have found that people don't really fish optimally for Philania and for Sidereal Whale. And if this was any other fish, I think big fish, it's okay to get away with that, especially in Endwalker. They were very generous. And to a degree, I would even say that the legends, for Caquata, Sidereal Whale, Garliicthus, Hyphlosaurus, Snoiperaxis, etc., they're also pretty generous for legendaries in the grand scheme of things. I think Endwalker's legendaries are probably the most generous since A Realm Reborn. Assuming, current content, that is. But you really need, when you're fishing for legendary fish, a lot of them you really need to know. You really need to be able to practice the art of fishing really, really well. And part of that is being very knowledgeable about the fishing hole, knowing when a fish is going to bite, knowing when you're wasting time, when you're wasting GP, how to manage and conserve that GP, and basically just being able to actually attack a fishing hole optimally. And that's something that I'm not seeing a ton of. Probably if you're listening to this, you're the type of person who's really into fishing. And if you're not, that's fine. Hi, nice to meet you. So this may be coming to you, and you might be like, yeah, I already know this. But there's a lot of people who don't. And I think that's where we have a bit of I think that's where the perception of Sidereal Whale gets a little bit skewed. So when you're fishing for Sidereal Whale, the key part of Sidereal Whale is horizon events. These are a strong bite. That's 2 exclamation points. They bite. They're pretty isolatable. So and when I say that, that means you know that if you get a strong bite between this time and that time, you are almost certainly going to get a horizon event. There's a good chance that it will be, at least. And so when you go for horizon events, what you need to know is when the first thing you should know is when to stop fishing. And for this, that's going to basically be around about 14 seconds after cast. Any strong bite after that, it is more likely to be an EBE, and you do not want to be catching that when you are basically going for Philania. So the first thing when you're optimizing for horizon event is stop fishing. If you don't have a bite by 14 seconds after casting, you press hook, it cancels the cast, so you can, come back in and you can apply chum again and cast back out. If you have a strong bite before then you reel it in. And it's either going to be, at that point, it's going to be a horizon event or it's going to be a traina. And this is the second part of optimizing for Sidereal Whale. And something that I think isn't taught very well in game, and I don't expect it to be, but it's using surface slap often and consistently and being able to manage your GP. It is okay to use surface slap on traina. I recommend it. Everyone I talk to will recommend it. And what it does is that it basically means that any sort of strong bite, again, which is the 2 exclamation points, if you get any sort of bite before 14 seconds, it's going to be guaranteed to be a horizon event. And now that you can guarantee that that's what that's going to be, you can now start using prize catch. You can better, more confidently and more safely be able to reel in early. You can start making better decisions about what GP you're going to use, what skills you need to be using. And to add on to that, the next step would then start using chum, because now you use chum, which reduces the time it'll take a fish to bite on cast by 50%. That's our current estimate, is around 50%. So now basically any bite before 7 seconds, that's going to be a horizon event. Anything else after 7 seconds, you don't want to reel it in. At 7 seconds, you should press hook to bring yourself in, assuming there's nothing on the line, and use chum and cast back out. It's just those 2 things, and even for me, this took a little bit of time to get used to. I would go to Philania windows with no intention of catching Philania, just to practice, just to get familiar with the fishing hole and getting familiar with how much GP I have, how the regen rate feels, and being able to know, like, okay, if I'm on cooldown, how much GP can I use that without it causing issues for me? So once you start feeling more comfortable with your GP and using surface slap and chum in conjunction with prize catch, you can use prize catch, you can use makeshift bait, you could even be using patience too. I wouldn't use patience unless you or in real dire straits. Patience 2 even during the window is fine. Angler's Arts is actually pretty it's pretty robust enough that you don't really need to start with 10 Angler's Arts stacks. For Sidereal Whale, I do recommend it because it does make things a little bit easier and does kind of remove basically it widens your opportunities. It isn't necessary, but it does help. But if you didn't maybe you just show up to a Sidereal Whale window, or you're late and you don't have time and you have to proc intuition right away, opening with patience 2 works perfectly fine, because then you'll start building angler's art stacks, and then after about 1 patience 2 duration, you'll be able to really start using those stacks effectively. Maybe it'll be 2. I think it's been a while since I've practiced that, but it's totally doable. And how efficiently you tackle Sidereal Whale really does come down to, and I'm going to get flamed for saying this, a bit of skill. The skill with fishing is how you use your skills, just like any other class. And we didn't see that a lot in Endwalker fishing. We didn't see that need in Sidereal Whale and a lot of the legends, really, like Snowy Praxis, Hyphlosaurus, a little bit of Garliexis, at least during prep. Those are all fish that are like, you really got to know how to use your skills. Do I think that they test you on using your skills as well as they could? Not really. I don't think that these are the greatest legends ever made. I definitely don't think Sidereal Whale is one of the best legends, but it definitely does do its best to actually check and see if you are familiar with your skills. And so, if you're struggling to catch Sidereal Whale, I would recommend go to Lemonade 3 Beta, and it doesn't matter when, and just start with nothing and pop Patience 2. Just specifically focus on mooching. Get familiar with that. Get familiar with reeling in at 14 seconds and casting back out. Get familiar with using chum and when you should be able to do it and when you can't. Get familiar with using makeshift bait and having to build angler's art stacks. Show up, get 10 angler's art stacks, pretend that it's about to be a window, and go from there and see what happens. Start with 10 stacks, see how you can do that and get that practice in. If you want to practice during a Philania window, go for it, because if you win, if you're doing it right, there's a good chance you're going to get a Philania. That's a ton of script that you'll be able to use to basically pay back the Stardust that you would be using the whole time through. And also get familiar with the best way to trigger intuition. There's a lot of times when I see people who are like struggling with Horizon events, they're like, I finally caught Philania, but I have to sit here and wait because I already caught the EBEs and I've already caught the Unbegottens. When you're triggering intuition, you want to catch Philania first, and then you can catch Unbegotten, or catch Unbegotten and Philania at the same time. That's up to you. The main point is EBE should be last, because that is the easiest fish that you can use, or easiest fish to catch out of all 3, and you can use identical cast, and you have way more control, and it's a whole lot safer because you don't have the collectibles windows up. If you disconnect with that window up, you're screwed. If you accidentally press yes or no before the actual window, you're screwed. So leaving not Philania, I guess, for last is like a really big thing that you can do to make it a little bit easier on yourself and a little bit less stressful when going for Sidereal Whale. So moving on from optimization for a bit, let's talk about Whale Jail, which is like one of the hottest topics around Sidereal Whale, and something that I'm a bit split on. So the concept of jailing is something that has come about when with the mechanics around intuition. So basically with Fisher's intuition, if you have a fish that requires multiple fish to trigger that intuition buff, there are some rules that if you follow them, it doesn't matter when you catch those fish, the progression towards triggering that buff isn't broken. So if looking at we'll say sea butterfly, which requires 3 sky fairy and 3 scorpion flies, I can now I can catch 3 sea butterflies, and then I can just stand around in the sea of clouds for days and come back, catch 3 scorpion fly, and poof, I get intuition. As long as I don't do a list of things, and I have a video on how Fisher's intuition works. I'm not going to necessarily list out every single rule because a lot of them are kind of convoluted to explain, but also not necessary for this for the conversation we're having. But basically, as long as you don't leave the zone, that includes going into instances. So you can't queue up for a dungeon, you can't do triple triad, you can't do PvP. As long as you don't leave the zone, and as long as you don't fish in another fishing hole, then whenever you complete that intuition requirement, it will trigger. And jailing is something that basically means that you prepare for something way earlier than the actual window, and then you just are locked into that zone. We saw it come up a lot, and the term jailing came about during Shadowbringers with lancetfish, where people would catch Mora tecta in a window like 4 hours before lancetfish was up, and would have to wait in the Tempest. And this was before they even added the ability that logging out doesn't break intuition progress. It used to do that before patch like 5.56, 5.57, one of those. If you logged out, it reset your intuition. That is no longer the case. You can log out and it's perfectly fine. But it was with lancetfish and Mora tecta that the term jailing came about, because you're basically locked in the zone. So Lancet Jail is where you would catch a Mora tecta, and then you have to wait until the Mora tecta window before lancetfish comes up to catch the second Mora tecta, hopefully. And basically the time that you're waiting there is Lancet Jail. For Sidereal Whale, we now see what everyone is calling Whale Jail. And Whale Jail is the time... basically you lock yourself in Ultima Thule once you've caught a Falania. And I have heard people go to Ultima Thule days in advance of a Sidereal Whale window to catch the Falania, and then they are stuck there for days. And this has understandably gotten a lot of people really upset because they feel like they have to do this. And I'm going to say something that, like, just let me finish what I'm saying and before anyone gets angry. You do not have to do this. It is not a hard requirement of catching Sidereal Whale, catching Falania, that you have to show up 2 days in advance or 6 hours in advance, catch it, and then wait. It is not something that you have to do. It is not mechanically a requirement for catching this fish. However, a lot of people feel like they have to. And I'm not going, and I don't disagree with that. I think there's a lot of times I've done jailing, and it's a bit weird to describe to somebody. It's like, oh yeah, sorry, I can't join you for raid. I can't join you on that raid because I'm stuck in Ultima Thule for another 12 hours. I don't like besmirch anybody who decides to do a jail for a fish. But I do want to make it clear, if someone is like, you have to show up 12 hours early to just start catching a fish in order to, get the intuition, that's wrong. You do not have to do that, but it is potentially beneficial because, like we were talking about earlier, Falenia is kind of finicky. Mathematically, it should be 1 in 4. 1 in 4 windows. So at most, you should only have to show up 4 or 5 windows ahead of Sidereal Whale, which is about 4 or 5 hours because Falenia is up every Eorzean day, which is about an hour and 10 minutes. So in reality, you don't need to spend more than 4 or 5 hours ahead of time if you choose to jail. That said, a lot of people go early because Falenia is a little finicky because you have to be able to get the Horizon events, and then that Horizon event needs to mooch into a Falenia. So it's not like Lancet where with Lancet Fish you need to catch 2 more Atecta in order to get the intuition. Here you actually have to get a fish, and then that fish actually has to mooch into Falenia. So it's like a double layer compared to the single layer for Lancet Fish. So a lot of people show up like really early, and it's very frustrating. And I think this is one of the I don't think this is a design flaw with Sidereal Whale. I think it's a design flaw with Falenia. Falenia for Endwalker was the jackpot script fish. It's at the time, at the current time of recording, it's about, max size, max tier. It's about 1400 script, which is the most of any other script fish. It is equivalent to Aepoke, Sculptor, Barrel Eye from the previous expansions. It's like the pseudo big fish at launch. In Dawn Trail, we will have one of them at least. Assumably, we might have 2. Who knows? But it's basically the not big fish at launch. And so it's a little finicky, and people struggle to catch it. And I think that struggle then gets pushed onto Sidereal Whale, which is because they feel like they have to show up really early to be able to get the Falenia to guarantee the intuition. And sometimes they don't even sometimes they're not even able to do that. I have seen people who will go to 8 windows before a window and not get 8 Falenia windows before a Sidereal Whale window and not actually get the Falenia and not get a chance at Sidereal Whale. And that feels shitty. Sorry, I'm swearing here. That feels like crap. That definitely feels terrible. And I think that isn't an issue with Sidereal Whale. I think Sidereal Whale, including Falenia, was a good decision for that window. I think for that fish, I think that made sense. I feel like Falenia is the issue here. So going back to what I was saying, the numbers I was throwing around earlier, Falenia sits around a 5% chance of biting off of a mooch, and you assumably optimally will get 5 Horizon event per window. I'm not going to try and do the math of the percent chance of getting a Falenia in a single window. It's obviously less than 5%, but it's kind of low. And I think I would have rather have seen a fish instead, I'm trying to think of what fish I was going to use for this example because I was dumb and didn't write it down. Drepanapsis with Bond Splitter. I think having it be maybe 2 Unbegotten, the 3 EBEs, and maybe 2 or 3 of the big fish version of EBE, or as I lovingly call it, big EBE big number. I think that might have been a little more interesting, but then it would have been less engaging because you wouldn't be having to mooch as much, even though that mooch would have been on the side of actually you would still have to know how to optimize Horizon events. You just wouldn't have to do it as much. I think that might have been an interesting alternative. to help minimize jailing. You would have still had to have jailed, but if I'm looking at the Carby tracker, which I did not actually bring this up specifically, but if I type that in, EBE big number, which the big number is 852738, 2% uptime, it goes into umbral winds, so it would be fair into umbral from 12 to 16. Not great. You still would have had to show up really early, but they could have changed EBE to be 16 to midnight ahead of time. And I don't know how these decisions are made. I'm not going to pretend to know how these decisions are made. But I think it could have been interesting if they had multiples of those, because then you would have had basically a lancet fish or a bond splitter, a drepanapsis, with a little bit more work. And I think that would have made it more interesting. I think making Sidereal Whale the mooch still would have been fun. It would have made the approach a little bit different. You still probably would have seen jailing, but it wouldn't have been as frustrating. EBE big number is very, I don't want to say shy, but it's also not like hella common. It's, in my experience, it's pretty on par. Like, it's not terrible. I think that's a interesting alternative that they could have included instead of Philania. But going back to just like catching Philania, I think from what I was saying, a lot of the concern around, a lot of the frustration around Philania does come down to being able to optimize that window. Being able to know when to slap Traina, when to chum, basically how to use your GP. And I don't think the game really prepared fishers for that specifically. A lot of the Endwalker fish, and I was talking about this in my last video, a lot of the Endwalker fish are slap and chum. I say they're slap and chum, but it's basically on par with previous expansions, but they're not as involved. They don't really test you as much as they have in previous expansions. And so I think we kind of had like this huge jump in skill level, or skill expectation, I guess is probably the better way to put it, for Sidereal Whale, that over time, the community will eventually be able to get up to, either through practice, through guides, like my guide, maybe even this video. There's a handful of other places where you can get, tips on how to catch Sidereal Whale. More gear, better gear, new skills. All these things will make Sidereal Whale a little bit easier. And I think over time, Sidereal Whale's frustration will go down. We'll see some more positive things come out of Sidereal Whale, because I think having such a mooch-heavy fish was great. One of the things that I talked about in my last video with Endwalker was we didn't really have a lot of fish that really utilized or made the Fisher kit in Endwalker shine. And I think Sidereal Whale is actually one of those fish. It's not the best example. I still think Durdina fish, Cosmic Haze to a degree, are probably some of the best fish, at least in Endwalker. For fish that weren't added in Endwalker, Stethecanthus, Ruby Dragon, both are great experiences now with the current kit. But I think Sidereal Whale will be up there. I think there's a lot of active decision making, and there's a lot of GP management that you can have that will make the experience be a little bit easier and a little bit nicer. And so long term, that's kind of what I'm predicting for Sidereal Whale, is that we'll move away from the frustration we have now, because we're going to be moving into a time when there's a whole lot more uptime. you can be a little bit more active. People will actually be able to fish for it more. The downside is they won't have as much time between windows to catch Philania, so there might be a few that they miss. But now that it's going to be coming up more often, again, from the time of recording here on June 9th, I think it's going to be a little bit better. I think we've just really had a rough start, a really rough start with Sidereal Whale. And I think that we're going to be able to move Sidereal Whale out of the, I think, current F tier. A lot of people hold it in, and at least maybe move it up to a C tier. It's not, I still don't think, like, even objectively looking at it or subjectively looking at it, I don't think it's going to be considered one of the best legendaries of all time, but I definitely think that it's going to have a bit of a turnaround long term. And when I say long term, I mean over the next expansion, because I don't even know what skills we're getting for that, so that might change things. And I do know that in, oh gosh, we're getting 7.0, so in 8.0, if nothing changes with fish eyes, it will get nerfed, at least then, if it doesn't already in 7.0. It'll get nerfed in 8.0 when fish eyes unlocks Philania to be an always up fish, so you'll be able to catch it whenever you want. So now, instead of spending, oh gosh, that would have been what, about 12 minutes, 12 times 4, 48, say roughly an hour, getting a Philania over the span of 4 or 5 hours, you can now just actually show up a couple hours beforehand and then just grab your Philania and go. Yeah, I think I think long term, Sidereal Whale is going to be okay. I don't think that it really has had enough time within the community to be able to settle in, process, and really force the community to get the understanding, get that comfort with using all of these skills and making these decisions that are needed to really optimally fish for a Sidereal Whale. I think, I'm saying I think a lot here because I'm trying to really put into words how I want to say this, because I don't want to necessarily be like, oh, Sidereal Whale is going to be great and amazing in the future, because I don't know that for sure. But I also don't want to dismiss the fact that a lot of people have had really bad experiences with Sidereal Whale. I think somebody was in the Fishcord right before I was recording mentioned that they were like on their 13th intuition without a bite. Or at least they had like one bite and it slipped. I don't want to dismiss that, because that is definitely a thing that happens. And it's definitely an experience that isn't uncommon. If Sidereal Whale didn't have those issues, we wouldn't be hearing about them, and I wouldn't be making this now almost hour-long video podcast thing on the fish. So I don't want to necessarily dismiss that, but I think long-term, we're going to see the community's skill level just naturally increase, and this happens every expansion. This isn't just an Endwalker thing. We saw it going into Shadowbringers. We saw it going into Stormblood. There is just a skill level, like there's a bottom, like there's a floor, and it just comes up. It just naturally does this. This is just how it always works with these types of games. And so I think as we move forward, we're going to see that happen, and I think Sidereal Whale is going to be just fine. So I think that's everything on my notes. That's it. So I have talked about Sidereal Whale for 55 minutes. Not what I was expecting to be doing today, but I hope that this has helped some folks better understand kind of where Sidereal Whale is, why it keeps coming up in conversations around fishing, why some people are just really pissed off at it. And I hope that it has some sort of educational value for you. If not, just let me know. Let me know if you have any more questions about this. As much as I know so much, I only know so much about fishing, and I don't know everyone's experiences. And so I'm always happy to hear someone say like, oh, this is what I did. And so, or this is what I've been doing and it's still not working. So please share those experiences with me, and with others. And that's about it. So that's it for now. Good luck and happy fishing.